Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
You talk too much for a plumber, Jerry Ames said without blinking, not even bothering to hide the smug curl of his lip as he waved one fat, sunburnt hand toward the door like I was some damn intern bringing him coffee. Not a licensed tradesman with 32 years under his belt. I stood there, tools in hand, boots still wet from the busted pipe I just warned him about, staring at him like I just heard my own obituary. But I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I nodded, slowly, once, packed my gear into my battered red toolbox, and walked out of that overpriced coffin of a luxury condo unit, not looking back once even as I heard him mutter something to his clipboard guy about whiners with opinions. You want to know the funny part? That pipe I warned him about, severely corroded, wrapped in God knows what insulation, running under a weight-bearing wall, wasn't even the worst thing I'd seen on that site. Hell, I could have made a list. Uninspected HVAC ducts rerouted through firewalls, electrical panels installed by someone who apparently got their training off YouTube, and a complete lack of grounding in two units that were already pre-sold at $1 million a pop. But it was the pipe that got me canned. Not the damage itself. No, just the fact I opened my mouth about it. The real kicker? I didn't even want this job. Not really. I took it because my old commercial contract dried up, and we just refinanced the house after our daughter Ashley got into that private college in Chicago. So when the job came through, good pay, high-end project, name recognition, I told Linda I'd suck it up for 6 months and then we'd reevaluate. Play it safe. Keep the peace. You know, grown-up decisions. But you walk onto a job like that, and within a week, your gut starts screaming that something's off. Every experienced guy knows that feeling. Like a wire's been left live somewhere and you can't find the damn thing, but you know it's gonna bite somebody. And usually, that somebody's the guy who speaks up first. I spoke up on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I was out. I just finished patching a temporary joint when I saw it, moisture collecting near a junction where there shouldn't have been any. I asked Jerry about the schematic. He brushed me off. I told him I thought the pipe had been reused from a prior install, maybe even from the original structure before they gutted the place. He said, "Does it leak right now?" I said, "No, but it will." That was it. That was my sin. It wasn't even dramatic. Just a quiet, scornful dismissal. You talk too much for a plumber. Like that was some ultimate insult. As if a guy with a wrench in his hand isn't allowed to have a brain in his head. As if keeping my mouth shut while someone builds $1 million condo on rotten pipe was the honorable thing to do. So yeah, I left. But not before snapping a picture of the pipe. Not before noting the serial on the segment. Not before taking photos of the wall panels they were going to seal up by the end of that day. I didn't know what I'd do with them at the time. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. And here's where it gets interesting. The next morning, I'm out on my porch sipping cold coffee from a chipped mug I've had since the early 90s, trying to wrap my head around whether I should call my union rep or just let the whole thing slide, when I see a dark blue Crown Vic roll up. Government plates. Guy in a pressed shirt and reflective vest steps out, clipboard in hand, hard hat under one arm. Knocks on my door like he's collecting a census. "You Mike Langley?" he asks. "Depends who's asking," I say, because I'm tired and pissed and not in the mood for any more surprises. "I'm Inspector Ruiz, City Development Office. I'm looking into the Holter Heights project. Your name's on some paperwork I can't square." I blinked. "You mean the site I got fired from yesterday?" He frowns. "Fired? That's odd. They listed you as active on an inspection sheet filed this morning." Now I just stare at him, stunned. "That's impossible. Mind if I come in for a second?" He steps over the threshold like a guy who's seen this kind of mess before. Like someone who's had a share of contractors playing fast and loose with sign-offs. We sit at the kitchen table, me still in my coveralls, Ruiz already flipping through a printed packet like he's skimming a phone book. My name's on 3 different documents, 2 from after I got canned. "This is your signature?" he asks. I look. It's close. Real close. But it's not mine. They copied it from the original work agreement, cleaned it up just enough to pass at a glance. Not enough to fool a guy who's had to sign compliance forms in triplicate for half his damn life. "No," I say. "They faked it." Ruiz closes the folder like a man locking a door. He thanks me, gives me a card, says he'll be in touch. I don't sleep much that night. Something in me's rattling, like a wrench in the dryer. You don't work 30 years in construction and not see your share of dirty dealings. But this? Faking a licensed plumber's sign-off on an open safety issue? That's beyond greed. That's criminal. And they used my name to do it. Next morning, I get up early, pull out my phone, find every email thread, every invoice, every dated photo I've got from the site. I start putting together a folder, a real one, not because I'm bitter, not because I want revenge, because someone's gonna live in that building. Someone with kids, someone who trusts the walls won't fall in or flood or go up in flames. I may just be a plumber, but I've got something a hell of a lot rarer than titles or LinkedIn endorsements, a damn conscience. And here's my question to you. What would you do if your boss fired you not for failing, but for refusing to be part of a cover-up? Would you stay quiet to save your job, or would you burn it all down to protect your name? Stick around. Things are about to get a lot messy, eh? I didn't exactly dive into the whole thing out of some noble quest for justice. I want to make that clear, right from the start, because when you're 54, short on clients, and living with a mortgage the size of a small warship, you don't exactly have the luxury of revenge fantasies, no matter how much they tempt you. At first, all I wanted was to clear my name, because if there's one thing worse than being fired for speaking up, it's having your name slapped on forged permits after the fact, like a ghost still working for free, tied to a job site you got thrown off of like trash from a moving truck. So I started small, just a little digital digging. Old invoices, email threads, photos I'd taken on my phone from my own records, mostly to double-check specs or remember part numbers when I got back to the supplier. It didn't take long before things started to stink. I had a folder on my desktop I named Pipe Dreams, a little joke to keep it from feeling like obsession, and into it I started dropping every single thing I could remember from the Holter Heights site. Not just plumbing work, either. Sketchy invoices for materials that were never delivered. Subcontractors I'd never seen in person but whose names were listed on work logs. And worst of all, a copy of a plumbing layout with my initials scribbled on it, initials I never put there. Someone had been playing arts and crafts with official documents, and I didn't need a law degree to know that was serious business. I called up an old friend from my union days, Robbie Talley, guy who used to work out of the city's inspection office before he took an early retirement to fish more and deal with people less. We weren't close, but I figured he might know someone still on the inside. Turns out, he did. Better than that, he still had coffee once a week with a few of the junior inspectors. So I asked if he'd poke around, see if my name had come up on any recent filings. He said sure, but I could tell by the sound of his voice he was already half-spooked just hearing my story. When a guy like Robbie, who once threatened to fistfight a developer over an unpaid materials order, gets quiet, you know it's bad. He called back 2 days later. "You're not gonna like this," he said, his voice low like he thought someone might be listening, even over the phone. "There's at least 3 filings with your name on them. 2 sign-offs, 1 permit extension, all dated after you got the boot." I felt the anger crawl up my neck like steam from a ruptured pipe. "They're falsifying my sign-offs?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Looks like it," he said. "And not just yours." I recognized a couple other names, guys who haven't worked that site in months. Somebody's doing a full-on Frankenstein act with these documents. I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry. I stared at the printouts on my kitchen table like they were death notices. My name wasn't just being used, it was being weaponized. That meant liability. That meant risk. If something went wrong in that building, if a pipe burst, or a fire started, or a ceiling caved in, and my name was on the form, guess who's eating that lawsuit? Not the contractor. Not the developer. Me. The guy they already shoved out the door. I thanked Robbie and hung up, hands shaking just enough to make the coffee in my cup slosh over the rim. My wife, Linda, walked in right as I stood up, saw the look on my face, and didn't ask a single question, just slid a hand onto my shoulder and said, "Whatever it is, we'll handle it." That's when I realized I couldn't just move on. I couldn't look away. Not when these bastards were not only lying, but using my name to grease the wheels on a machine that was already breaking down. Because, yeah, I'd heard the rumors, 2 flooded bathrooms on the 10th floor, mold showing up in unfinished units, sudden delays that weren't being explained to investors. I'd brushed it off like gossip, but now it all lined up too well. And maybe the worst part? The building wasn't even close to done, and they were already hiding things. So what was going to happen after people moved in? After young families signed 30-year mortgages and started living on top of a half-built lie? That night, I sat in my garage with a cheap bottle of bourbon, staring at a wall of old job site photos I'd tacked up years ago. Back when work meant pride. Back when a guy could fix a leak and feel like he did something real. I thought about my daughter in Chicago, going into debt for an architecture degree she was passionate about, and I wondered what kind of buildings she was going to help design. and whether they'd be sabotaged by greed like this one. That's when I made the decision, not just to clear my name, but to make sure this whole thing got dragged into the light. I didn't want money. I didn't want a job back. I wanted accountability. And yeah, I wanted Jerry Ames to sweat. Because firing me was one thing. Using my signature like a get-out-of-jail-free card? That was personal. So I sent an email. Not to Jerry. Not to the developer. But to Inspector Ruiz, the guy who'd knocked on my door that morning with questions and a sharp eye. I attached everything, photos, documents, a timeline. I didn't hold anything back. And right before I clicked send, I added one last line. I didn't build this mess, but I sure as hell won't be the guy holding the bag when it falls apart. And then I waited. Only took 48 hours before things started shifting. Calls I didn't recognize. Voicemails without names. One message that just said, back off. But it was already too late. I'd followed the trail, and now the trail was leading somewhere they didn't want me to go. And trust me, I was just getting started. By the time the third voicemail came in, just static at first, then a low voice breathing something I couldn't quite make out before hanging up, I already knew I'd crossed the line from concerned ex-employee into full-blown whistleblower territory. And once you step into that mess, there's no stepping back without getting your boots dirty. I wasn't stupid enough to think these people played nice, especially not when you started poking around the bones of a high-end condo project being built faster than gravity could keep up with it. But I'll admit, the intimidation tactics still caught me off guard. The silence, the calls, the online forms that stopped working the second I uploaded my files, they weren't subtle, but they weren't sloppy either. It was like someone was tugging on every string they had, hoping I'd get scared enough to let go. Instead, I doubled down. I started keeping a written log, the old-school kind, pen and notebook, with dates, times, names, and everything I noticed out of the ordinary. Linda thought I was being dramatic at first, like maybe this was some kind of midlife ego trip disguised as a righteous mission, but then she saw the third fake work order pop up online under my name. That was the turning point. We were sitting at the kitchen table, late, the air thick with quiet resentment, and I turned my laptop around to show her a screenshot from the Holter Heights website, a project update praising our trusted veteran plumber, Mike Langley, for rapid completion of all third-floor unit installs. My photo wasn't there, but my name was, and that was enough. Her face changed. She didn't argue after that. The worst part of it wasn't even the lies. It was the way they used my silence like consent, counting on me being just tired enough, just broke enough, just disrespected enough to roll over and go away. That's how these people operate. They build things not on concrete and steel, but on the assumption that the little guy will shut up and stay in his lane. That was the real rot beneath Holter Heights, not the mold, not the corroded pipe, not even the forged signatures. It was the arrogance. I needed more than paperwork. I needed proof that couldn't be spun, couldn't be explained away by some PR firm or swept under the rug by a lawyer in a pinstripe suit. And sometimes, when you want the truth to come out, you have to make it so loud they can't ignore it. So I made a burner email account and started sending things anonymously. At first, just to the city inspector's office and the local news tip lines. Then to the homeowners' forums I found by digging through Facebook groups and developer sites. I leaked the original photos of the piping, the mismatched serials, the altered inspection reports with my forged signature. I shared a clip I'd secretly recorded on my last day on site, a throwaway conversation between Jerry and one of his foremen, laughing about getting it done before the snitching starts. That one hit hard. It wasn't graphic. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. You could hear the casual contempt in Jerry's voice, the way he spit out the word inspector like it tasted sour. That clip started spreading faster than I expected. I saw it posted under hashtags like hashtag Holterheist and hashtag condo scam. One homeowner commented, "Is this where my HOA fees are going?" That one made me chuckle. Another said, "We were going to move in next month." Not anymore. That one didn't. Meanwhile, my daughter Ashley was home on spring break, and she sat me down in the garage one night with her laptop open, her face pale in the glow of the screen. She had pulled up a contractor review site, and there was my name, buried in a one-star review from a supposed client claiming I'd abandoned a job halfway through and stolen materials. It was dated 2 days after I'd been fired. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like she wasn't sure whether to be proud or scared. I looked at her and said, "You know it's fake." "I know," she said, "but they're trying to kill your name." And she was right. They weren't just fighting back. They were trying to erase me completely. scrub me out of the narrative so that when the building eventually collapsed, metaphorically or otherwise, they could point to a ghost and say, well, that guy doesn't work here anymore. That night, I took Ashley's advice and started backing up everything on an encrypted drive. We uploaded it to 2 separate cloud accounts, printed hard copies, even stored one flash drive in the back of the freezer, next to a bag of peas and a ribeye from 2 summers ago. Paranoia? Maybe. But I've lived long enough to know that the minute you think they can't get to you, that's when they do. And then, almost like a gift from the universe, or maybe just karma showing up fashionably late, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You're not alone." The message was simple: a name, a time, and a place. Someone wanted to meet. I almost deleted it, but something in me said not to. Because if I was going to take this thing all the way, I couldn't do it alone. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one who'd seen what they tried to hide. And they were about to find out I wasn't staying quiet anymore. The diner where I was supposed to meet the mystery contact looked like every other roadside place on the outskirts of town: faded vinyl booths, a jukebox that hadn't worked in 20 years, and coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through a pair of old work socks. I got there 15 minutes early and took the booth in the back corner, the one under the flickering light bulb that buzzed just enough to make my molars itch. I didn't know who I was meeting, didn't even know if it was real, but if this whole thing had taught me anything, it was that sometimes the biggest truths come from the people you least expect. So I waited. I didn't drink the coffee. I just sat there watching the door like a man waiting for a ghost. She showed up 8 minutes late, wearing a navy jacket with a county seal on the breast and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept since the last administration. She didn't introduce herself right away, just sat down across from me and slid a folder onto the table like we were negotiating a hostage release. I didn't open it. Not yet. "I read your emails," she said, voice low but firm, like she was used to being ignored and had learned how to cut through the noise. "You from the city?" I asked, nodding at the patch. She shook her head. "County infrastructure. I used to sign off on permit extensions before they moved it upstairs. Now I just chase ghosts." She pointed at the folder. "That's your name. 5 times. All forged. 3 different dates. One of them after the date you sent your official resignation notice to the developer's system." I raised an eyebrow. "I never sent a resignation notice." She smiled, tight and humorless. "Exactly. Turns out, Holter Heights had submitted a resignation form under my name, digitally signed. On a date, I was actually in a meeting with my union rep about the termination. They filed it to cover their tracks, make it look like I had walked away, so when the building started to fail and questions came up, they could point to the paperwork and say, he left on his own terms, nothing to see here. But whoever faked that form forgot one key thing. I still had the timestamp from my keycard exit skin at the front gate the day they fired me. And it didn't match the timeline in their records. Not even close. That folder was gold. Cold, hard-proof. And yet, something about the way she looked at me said it wasn't enough. "They've done this before," she said, stirring sugar into a cup she had no intention of drinking. "I've seen their names on 4 other sites. 2 had leaks within 6 months of opening. 1 had a partial ceiling collapse. None of it ever made the news, just quietly settled. NDAs. Insurance payouts. Cleaned up like it never happened." My stomach twisted. "They're serial offenders," I said quietly. She nodded. "And the only reason this one's not buried yet is because you didn't go quietly." I leaned back in the booth, the plastic creaking under my weight. "So what now?" She pushed another envelope across the table, this one thinner, more discreet. "You send this to the State Licensing Board, the Union Ethics Board, and the Contractor Licensing Authority. At the same time, don't stagger them. Don't warn them. And once you do, don't stop. Because once you start this, it doesn't go backward." I took the envelope. I didn't ask her name. I think we both knew that was safer. The next day, I mailed the packet. Then I called an old buddy of mine, Tyrell, a journeyman who used to work under me back in my apprenticeship days. He'd been on Holter Heights for about a month before I got there, and he left quietly when things started smelling bad. He hadn't spoken out. Not then. But now, with proof in hand and the threat a little less shadowy, he was willing to talk. I recorded our conversation, with his consent, and what he told me lined up perfectly with everything I had been collecting. Deliberate cost-cutting on materials. Pressure to close walls before inspections. Quiet substitutions of low-grade parts ordered in bulk from a vendor tied to a developer's brother-in-law. It was dirtier than I thought, and now I had voices to back it up. I didn't go public yet. Not in full. But I started pushing the dominoes. I sent the files to 3 small-time journalists, the kind that don't get invited to the developers' cocktail hours but who still believe in real stories. One of them, a guy named Brent who used to cover city council meetings before getting shoved into the local lifestyle section, bit hard. He called me within hours. "Are you the plumber?" he asked. I said yes. He laughed. "They should have never fired you." The first article ran under the headline "Luxury Project, Rotten Core. Whistleblower alleges safety violations at Holter Heights." It wasn't a front-page bombshell, but it was enough to start stirring the pot. By the end of the week, the developer's office had to issue a statement, vague, full of legal fluff, the kind that says nothing but still screams that someone's sweating. And Jerry Ames? "Mister, you talk too much for a plumber?" He was suddenly very, very quiet. Then came the surprise. A call from a lawyer. Not mine. I didn't have one. Not yet. This guy represented a buyer's coalition, early investors in Holter Heights who had just learned about the leaked documents and were preparing to sue. He wanted to talk settlement. NDA. Quiet exit. Cash. He didn't say it in so many words, but the message was clear. They'd pay for my silence. I hung up on him. Because this wasn't about money anymore. This was about truth. About the men who work with their hands getting walked over by people who've never even seen the guts of a building. About names being dragged through the mud because it's easier than fixing what's broken. Strike slow. Strike clean. And when the dust settles, make damn sure your name's still standing. Because I wasn't just building a case anymore. I was dismantling theirs. Piece by piece. There's a moment, right before a pipe gives out, where everything feels completely normal. No warning whistle, no creak, no groan, just an eerie stillness, like the water itself is holding its breath. And then, suddenly, it all blows at once in a mess of pressure, fury, and noise that can bring a whole structure to its knees. That's what the last 2 weeks felt like. A slow, pressurized buildup of silence and denials, emails not being returned, meetings postponed, statements released through lawyers instead of people. But I knew it was coming. You don't spend 3 decades in the trades without learning how to read the signs. And just like I'd called that corroded pipe under the subfloor weeks before it cracked, I could feel this whole damn project trembling at the seams. It started with a notice from the city posted right on the job site fence, bright orange, bold letters, "Stop work order due to pending safety review." That was the first visible crack. It spread fast. Local news started circling the project like vultures on a stalled freeway. I didn't even have to push the next move because the leak had already started pouring into the public record. 3 lawsuits were filed in the same week, one from a group of pre-construction buyers, one from a subcontractor who claimed he was forced to install faulty materials under threat of losing his remaining pay, and one from the widow of a man who had invested his entire retirement savings into a unit and was now trying to back out of the deal. The names listed in the filings? Jerry Ames, Holter Development Group, and in the footnotes of every case, right there in black and white, Mike Langley, whistleblower, licensed plumber, source of original complaint. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. This fight, this slow, grinding unraveling of their machine, had cost me more than I realized. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, constantly checking my email for threats or updates, jumping every time a car idled too long in front of the house. Linda did her best to hold it together, but I could tell she was worn out. Too, she never signed up to be the wife of a man with a target on his back. And Ashley? She was proud, sure, but also scared. Her professors had pulled her aside to ask about the news articles. She tried to play it cool. But I could see it in her eyes, the worry that maybe her dad had done something dangerous or stupid, or both. Then came the public hearing. The city council, under mounting pressure from press and buyers, opened a review into the project's permits and approval process. They asked for testimony. They subpoenaed Jerry, the developer's CFO, and yes, me. I didn't want to go. I'd already said everything I had to say. But when a man gets the chance to speak his truth in a room full of people who try to bury it, sometimes you've got to stand up and say your piece. The council chamber was packed. Press, lawyers, angry investors, and a handful of contractors I hadn't seen since the job went sideways. I wore my best work shirt and walked up to that microphone like I was walking into a burning room. I wasn't nervous. I was done being nervous. I just told the truth. I laid it all out, one slow sentence at a time. The forged documents, the shoddy work, the pressure to sign off, the threats, the phone calls. I read their lies back to them, and let the silence do the rest. And when I was done, I played the recording. The one from the first week of the job. Jerry's voice, laughing with his foreman, saying, "We'll patch it up for now. No one's gonna rip open the drywall just to check a stupid pipe. It's already sold. Who gives a damn?" The room went still. You could feel the air go cold. Even the lawyers shifted in their seats. After that, the dominoes fell fast. Jerry was suspended from all pending projects by the end of the week. The Holter Heights project was frozen indefinitely, pending full inspection. Word came down that the state licensing board had opened a fraud investigation, and Holter Development's insurance provider quietly cut ties with them. The news picked it up. They used a photo of me from 20 years ago, standing in front of a boiler room with soot on my face and a wrench in my hand, like I was some working-class hero from a movie. I didn't feel like one. I felt like a man who'd just spent 6 months fixing a leak no one wanted to admit existed. And then, the offer came. It wasn't subtle. A lawyer in a suit so sharp he could have shaved with it called my cell and said the developer was prepared to settle. Big number. Clean record. Gag order. Walk away, forget it happened, take the money and retire. Linda wanted me to consider it. Ashley didn't say a word. But I said no. Because you don't get to poison a building and then buy your way out of it. Not when people are going to live there. Not when workers are going to put their names on things they didn't do. Not when a whole community almost got conned into trusting a foundation made of lies. I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. I wanted truth. And I got it. In the strangest, quietest way. At Ashley's graduation, I sat in the back, not wanting to make a scene. She crossed the stage, beamed at us from behind that ridiculous cap, and when she came down to hug me, she whispered, "They taught us about whistleblowers in class this semester. You were in the slideshow." I laughed until my throat hurt. And just when I thought it was over, when I thought I could put this all behind me, I got a letter. No name. Just a return address tied to another development. Different name. Same developer. Inside, a single sentence. "They're doing it again." So maybe it wasn't over. Maybe that pipe hadn't burst yet. But I knew what to do now. And this time, I wasn't going to do it alone. You'd think after all that, the hearings, the lawsuits, the news cycles and inboxes flooded with people either offering me a handshake or hoping I'd go away quietly, things would settle down, that I'd finally get back to my old routine, wake up early, make coffee the way I always had, maybe putter around in the garage and pretend I wasn't still waiting for the next shoe to drop. But the truth is, some things don't settle. They just shift shape, become quieter maybe, but heavier somehow, like a water tank with a slow leak. You don't see it right away, but eventually the ceiling starts to sag, and by the time anyone notices, it's too late to pretend nothing's wrong. The letter from that second project sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I did anything about it. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I absolutely did. Same crooked developers, new project name, fresh batch of hired hands just trying to pay their bills while the people at the top clipped every corner they could find, like vultures fighting over the last scraps of drywall. I told myself I wasn't getting involved this time. I told Linda it was someone else's turn, that I'd done enough damage for one lifetime, damage to my sleep, to my reputation, even to the quiet peace we used to have around dinner. She just looked at me, no judgment, just that same steady, tired love in her eyes, and she said, "If you don't do something, who will?" That question stuck with me. Because once you see how it all works, the backroom deals, the forged names, the inspections passed with a wink and a gift card, you can't unsee it. It's like mold behind the tile. It spreads, even if you close the door and pretend it's not your bathroom. And after everything that happened, I knew damn well they hadn't learned their lesson. They just learned to hide better. So I made a call. Not to the press this time, not to the city, not even to Robbie or Ruiz. I called a guy I used to work with back in the early days, Pete Ransom, the kind of foreman who knew every trick in the book and didn't care who got mad as long as the job got done right. He wasn't working anymore. Not officially, had some nerve issues in his hands, couldn't hold a wrench for more than a few minutes, but his mind was sharp, and his memory was a vault. I told him what I'd gotten, didn't sugarcoat it, didn't pitch it like a grand mission. I just said, "They're doing it again." He didn't even pause. He just said, "What do you need?" We started digging quietly. It was easier this time, not because they were any sloppier, but because I already knew where to look. Procurement records, subcontractor licenses, discrepancies between building plans and what was actually being installed. And we weren't alone. A couple of the younger guys I'd worked with on Holter Heights had started paying attention. They reached out, asked how they could help. One of them, a sharp kid named Marcus, had access to internal emails and start-of-day work briefings. He started feeding us documents, nothing flashy, just enough to paint the picture. It was the same damn song. Cheap parts passed off as spec compliant. Inspection schedules adjusted at the last minute to avoid scrutiny. Labor paid under the table to avoid benefits and liability. Different site, same rot. And here's the thing that really got me. They were betting that no one would notice because the world had moved on. Holter Heights was old news now. Everyone assumes these stories end cleanly, bad guy gets caught. Hero rides off into the sunset, system fixes itself. But in real life, there's no soundtrack, no credits, no dramatic final scene. The system doesn't fix itself. It just resets, waits for people to forget, then starts again. But I hadn't forgotten. I took everything we'd gathered and sent it off, not anonymously this time. I signed my name at the bottom. I knew the risks. They might come for me again. Might try to smear my name a second time. But I also knew something else. This time, they'd have to deal with a network. With witnesses. With people who didn't scare as easy. They thought they could outlast us. But they forgot the most important thing. You can fire a guy, bury his name in fake paperwork, pay off the right people to keep the wheels turning. But you can't kill the truth. Not if someone keeps telling it. Not if someone refuses to shut up and walk away. A few days ago, I got another letter, this one from a homeowner in Holter Heights. She'd read about the inspection failures, about the halted construction, about my testimony. She'd lost her deposit in the chaos, but she said something that knocked the wind out of me. She said, "Thank you for saying what the rest of us were too afraid to. You gave us a way to fight back." That's when I realized it was never just about the pipe, or the paperwork, or even Jerry Ames and his smug little empire. It was about standing in the gap when no one else would. About putting your damn name on the line when it counted. So maybe this job never really ends. But some things are worth showing up for anyway. And if they thought I talked too much before, well, they haven't heard anything yet.